Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting episode of the Beginner's Mind series. In some of my parenting workshops, I've always asked the question to young parents about what would they like their children to be when they grow up. And apart from the usual answers that you would expect from parents, one of the top answers was, I want my kids to be happy when they grow up. Happiness is something that we all crave for. And our guest today, I came in contact with this body of work first when I came to know about this online course on happiness, which is one of the most popular MOOCs, massive open online courses in the world. And he is none other than Professor Raj Raghunathan. First of all, let's welcome him with a round of virtual applause. Namaste. You're welcome to the show, and I really appreciate you staying back late to have this conversation with us. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Raj Raghunathan is the Zale Centennial Professor of Business at the McCombs School of Business at UT Austin. He's interested in how people's judgment and decisions impact their happiness and fulfillment. Professor Raj's work has appeared in top journals across the world and has been cited in several mass media outlets such as The Atlantic, The New York Times, and the Harvard Business Review. His book, which is an interesting title, by the way. It suits very well to all the corporate people that I meet. If you're so smart, why aren't you happy? His book, that's a bestseller, has been translated in more than 13 languages so far, and his TED Talk, which I highly recommend all of you go watch and visit, has been viewed by over 17 million people worldwide live on Star TV. His latest online course is on employee happiness, launched in late 2019, which has been also rated as one of the top MOOC courses of all times, alongside his previous course, which is A Life of Happiness and Fulfillment. I keep getting your newsletters, Professor Raj, very well written, a wealth of information. I think your style, your approach is very simple that people can relate to, and I look forward to having a wonderful conversation with you today, sir. Once again, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and I really, really appreciate being on the show. I know it's a little bit late for me, but I'm very excited.
It's a pleasure to have you. It's a pleasure to have you. I want to begin with, if I'm not wrong, your subject at the McCombs School of Business, or when you taught at B schools across the world, including the ISB Hyderabad, where you are a visiting professor, has been marketing, right?
Yeah, I'm in the marketing department, but both at the McCombs School of Business and at ISB, I teach a course called Creativity and Leadership. Okay. And this course is more to do with happiness than with marketing. So,
I see.
Even though I'm in the marketing department, the main course I teach is this course, Creativity and Leadership, which has to do with happiness.
Which is wonderful, and I'm sure there's a correlation. Please help us understand, what drew you to study? You're a global authority on happiness by now, and what drew you to this field? Was it, intentional? Did you have it in mind right from when you started? Was there something that happened along the way? What drew you to it?
Yeah, so I've always been very interested in the topic of happiness. And what happened in 2007 was actually a kind of a trigger or a catalyst that made me take the next step of actually putting a course together. And what happened was I'd taken a bunch of MBA students from the McCombs School of Business, which is where I teach at the University of Texas at Austin, to India. And in 2007, it had been about 15 years since I'd graduated from my own MBA school. And I met up with a lot of my batchmates from all those years ago. And I noticed a couple of very interesting things. First, there's very little correlation between academic success and career success. The people who are the topper types are not necessarily always the ones who are also the bosses and doing very well in their careers, which is interesting. But I found the second thing that I noticed to be even more impactful, which is that, if anything, there was even lower correlation between career success and what you might call life success, how happy people are, how fulfilling they seem, their life seems to be, and so on. So I decided that I had to do something about it. So I decided to offer a course on happiness. This was about, now I started in 2009, just over 10 years ago. And I didn't know how long I would be teaching these classes, but it just went from strength to strength. I mean, there's just such a big hunger for the topic around the world, maybe particularly among people in the business world, for the topic of happiness, that it just took on a life of its own.
So, is it safe to assume that something has gone wrong in the business world, especially in the last few decades, that we've created cultures and work cultures and environments where people are not happy? Would that be right to assume? What changes do you think have happened recently? Because we've flourished as far as material success is concerned. We have time-saving gadgets. We got screens on our wrists. We have more information than we ever had before. Still, as you rightly observed, the subject of happiness is elusive for many, especially youngsters, because we are sold a dream and we buy it. The dream we are sold is in these flashy advertisements. I often joke about this realtor selling new apartments, and there's a happy family, right? There's a happy family picture. Everybody's looking happy. Even the dog looks happy, and there's fresh fruit on the table in front of you, and there's like, buy happiness, buy your next apartment here and you purchase happiness. And yet we know that's not the way to happiness. So what do you feel, especially when you talk about that, the business world, is there a correlation? Are we doing something wrong?
That's a great question. I think that it's a deep question as well. And I don't think that things have necessarily become worse in the recent past in terms of the business ethics and culture and things like that. I do think that there are many reasons why there is a deep hunger for the topic of happiness, especially in the business world, but even otherwise. And one of those top reasons is that I think there is more and more and more people who are recognizing as a matter of a personally experienced truth, as opposed to some kind of a concept out there,
Right.
that more money, more fame, more status, more power, etc., do not necessarily mean more happiness. Back 200 years ago, let's say, only maybe the kings and queens and the big industrialists of the world could really vouch for the statement that more money doesn't necessarily make you happy, because the rest of us were really poor, and
Right.
it was difficult to get even 3 square meals a day for many
Sure.
of us 200 years ago. And so if you told them that more money doesn't bring you more happiness, I think that those people would have said, you know what, I'll discover that for myself. Thank you. But now, so many people, I'd venture to put that number at maybe 1 billion people,
Right.
at the very least 500 million people around the world have enough access to resources, more than enough money to lead a comfortable life. And so
Sure.
they know that that alone doesn't do it. And I think that's a very important reason for why there's a deep hunger for the topic. Of course, on top of it, there's also this phenomenon which you're referring to, which has certainly been researched in the United States, that people are more materially wealthy. So if you think about 100 years ago, even, right? I mean, to have warm water, reliable warm water flowing through your pipes to take a shower, etc., was unheard of.
Was a luxury, right.
Centrally air-conditioned houses, unheard of.
Absolutely.
Now, I mean, even the kings and queens back in the day didn't used to have it. Now, lots of people in the US have it.
Right.
And so it is true that we have more access to material things, but if you look at the happiness levels, they've not gone up. If anything, maybe they've come down a little bit. And I do think that that's also adding to this interest in the topic of happiness.
Should a happy workplace, as a leader, and I'm sure a lot of the people who are tuning into this conversation, whether it's on LinkedIn or YouTube right now, lead teams as entrepreneurs or managers or business leaders, or in government or other fields. Is this like a far-fetched idea to think and dream about a happy workplace as far as employee happiness goes? Is this attainable? And if yes, what are the minor shifts that I can make at my workplace so that I have a happy, productive workforce?
Yeah, I do think that one should aspire as a leader to have a happy workforce. Not just because I think it's the right thing to do. As a leader, at some level, we are parents and guardians of the well-being of the people who report to us. And I think it's the right thing to do, just as you said at the start, that, parents want their children to be happy, right? And likewise, leaders should want their employees to be happy. And so it's the right thing to do. But it also makes strategic sense, Simerjeet. So happier employees are more productive. They take
Right.
less sick leave. They are more collegial. They are more creative, they're more objective, and so they make better decisions, both individually and in teams. And so it's a kind of a proven fact now that organizations that have happier employees tend to do better. They tend to be more profitable. And so it makes strategic sense as well. And so it's a bit of a win-win. You're doing the right thing as well as doing the thing that is going to make you more profitable if you emphasize happiness. To the second part of your question, which is, what can managers do or what can leaders do? And the simple answer is take my second online course, okay? Because
All right.
well, that's what I cover. But if you want me to kind of just give you a 2-minute elevator pitch on the
Yes,
different things
please.
you can do, I think that it'd be very important to understand there are 5 major determinants of happiness in the
Okay.
workplace. And the first is that access to basic needs. It makes sense that if you do not even have access to basic needs, if your employees are not earning enough money to make
Right.
ends meet, you're
Uh-huh.
not going to be happy. But most of your listeners are probably not below basic needs, and I imagine that their basic needs are taken care of. And so, really, it's the 4 other kinds of criteria that are very important for people like the people in your target audience, and those would
Sure.
be autonomy. So,
Okay.
do the employees have enough of a sense of control over their own lives, and are they empowered to make the decisions that they want to make? Are they micromanaged, which would be the opposite of having autonomy, right? Do they have voice in the organization? Can they air their opinions and share their decisions and thoughts? And are those thoughts counted? Okay, so
Right.
those kinds of things,
Right. Uh-huh.
autonomy. Then mastery, which is, do the employees feel that they're progressing toward becoming increasingly good at whatever it is that they're doing, right?
Right.
So if you don't think that your skills are building up and you're growing and learning in your organization, you're going to be as happy as you would be if in fact you're growing and learning, right? So that's mastery. And then
Right.
belonging. Do you have a sense of connection with the people in the organization,
The peers.
particularly your
Right.
boss? Yeah,
Particularly your
peers are
boss.
very
Okay.
important,
Okay.
particularly your boss, because bosses have this unique position of affecting many of your outcomes, right? Not just your salary, but your sense of self-esteem. If the boss doesn't respect you, then that really is emotionally disturbing, and so on. So there is a saying in the happiness kind of world, in organizational context, which is that people don't leave organizations. People leave people.
Wow.
People leave people. Okay,
That is
so if you
profound.
don't get along with other people, especially your boss, but also your peers, very important, then you're probably going to quit. And the very last determinant is the culture of the organization. And I describe the happy culture as an abundance oriented culture. In an abundance oriented culture, you support each other, you're like a
Right.
family. And your win is going to make other people in the organization feel proud and feel
Sure.
happy and not insecure, right? And I think this is one of the toughest determinants, because most organizations are structured in a kind of a pyramidal fashion. So there's less and less people at the top, right? And
Right.
only one CEO. And
Yep.
so if you aspire to grow in your organization on the corporate ladder, then at some level you're going to have to compete with your peers, because only one of you can go get promoted, right?
Right. Right.
So there are kind of scarcity oriented constraints in organizations because of that. But to the extent that leaders can promote a sense of abundance, a sense of family, sense of rejoicing in each other's successes, that's when the organization is going to do well. And so that's a very tough nut to crack, as you can imagine, right?
Of course,
You
yes,
have
because you got to be competitive at the same time and collaborative.
Yes, exactly. So you got to compete with each other, perhaps in a healthy way. And of course, when it comes to competing with other organizations in your industry, you clearly have to, be very competitive. But within the organization, I think it is more important to be collaborative than to be competitive with each other. And that's the
Which,
job of a leader, to promote that.
Absolutely. It must come from the top, right? Because for everybody else,
Absolutely.
it could just be good intentions or, posters on the wall. But in practice, it'll only happen if the leadership is following that. So it's autonomy, it's mastery, it's sense of belongingness. And I forget the last
The
one
last
was
is the culture, the abundance-oriented culture,
the
right? And the culture of
abundance-oriented
the
culture.
organization.
Okay, great. No, those are very important things to keep in mind, and I'm sure that people who lead other people are listening to this right now. In fact, I read a piece of research by Daniel Goleman, and he talked about in his book on emotional intelligence the emotional Wi-Fi that leaders have. As you mentioned, leaders specifically have this power to impact the moods of the employees because somehow everybody's logging into that emotional Wi-Fi. So if you're in a good mood, perhaps through mirror neurons, you're also putting other people in a good mood. Or if you're in a horrible mood today, it's going to have an impact on the people who look up to you because because there's that invisible sort of emotional connection that's happening there. So thank you for those 5 points. And yes, I'll highly recommend that for everyone who's watching right now, go and enroll in the course on employee happiness. I'm sure there'll be lots of takeaways there. And don't be like me. I enroll and then I don't show up for the classes. No, complete your courses, guys. I'm a bad role model there. And I listened to, in one of your talks, Professor Raj, you make the statement that the many of the psychological traits that lead to success ironically get in the way of happiness. Could you please elaborate on that? What exactly do you mean that many of the psychological traits that are supposedly supposed to lead one to success ironically get in the way? Help us understand that a little bit
get in
more.
the way of happiness. Let me just back up a little bit and talk about this idea that we think that success leads to happiness, right?
Uh-huh.
And we think that happiness will be something that I will attain a little bit later in my life once I have devoted much of my life to being successful. And so we postpone happiness and pursue success with
Right.
the hope that that success will bring us happiness. But if you're not careful, the success can actually lower our happiness levels because some of the very things that lead to success come in the way of happiness. So let me just talk about three particular kind of things that come in the way of happiness that lead to
Sure.
success. Okay, so one of them is chasing superiority. Okay, so people who want to be successful often compare themselves to other people and they get motivated by somebody who's doing better than them and want to emulate their successes and feel
Right.
inspired by them and so on and so forth. But that very desire to be superior comes in the way of happiness. And there's many reasons why it comes in the way of happiness. And one of the big reasons, which I think most people can intuitively understand, is that it makes you a person who's not very pleasant to hang around with, right? So other people don't necessarily like people who pursue superiority, who are
Right.
constantly tom-tomming their achievements and putting other people down. Even if they do it in a classy manner, you can
Right.
easily detect it.
You can sense
Okay?
it, right? And there's this constant pressure around you, as well on you too,
Absolutely.
right?
Right. And also, there's no way that you can sustain a certain level of superiority. Even if you
Right.
do achieve it today, doesn't mean that tomorrow you'll have it. And so you constantly are insecure about somebody nipping at your heel, wanting to replace you, right?
Sure.
So that is one. And second is that it turns out when you become successful, especially when you become wealthy, you tend to deprioritize your relationships. Money makes us a little more self-centered. There's just a lot of research on this, and I can go into some of it if you're interested, but just take my word for it. There's just a lot of research showing that when you
Sure.
come into money, you tend to become a little more self-centered. You tend to deprioritize even your close relationships with your family and friends. And of course, part of this happens because of a physical reason, which is that when you come into money, you move into a bigger house, right? You might even have your own swimming pool. You might even have a compound wall around and a tennis court or what have you. And that physical distance that you impose between yourself and other people makes you deprioritize your relationships. Okay. And
Right.
it turns out that's a very bad move to make if you want to be happy, because we are highly social as a species. And if there's one thing that we have learned from the 25 years of research so far, in a concentrated research on happiness, it is that the single biggest determinant of your happiness is the sense of belonging that you have. Right? I mean, it was reflected in the statement that I said some time back about Gallup, right? People leave people. People don't leave
Yep.
organizations. So if you don't have a good sense of belonging in your personal
Right.
life too, you're guaranteed not to be happy. Okay? So that's another way in which success comes in the way of happiness. And finally, success often makes people overly control seeking. When you're good at what you do, when you make good decisions, you're given more control. You're given control over resources, money, etc. You're also given control over people. You lead a bigger team, right? That is one of the kind of hallmarks of success, is that you get more resources to control, money and people. And when you have that control, if you're not careful, it can be pretty intoxicating. It can make you seek even more control. And it turns out that being overly control seeking, whereby you want other people to obey you, behave in the manner that you think is appropriate, you think is right, you want control over outcomes, you want to live in a certain kind of a house, you want certain things to happen. It is the recipe for misery, because life by its nature is not controllable. Who could have predicted COVID? Okay. Who could have predicted the second wave in India? Nobody did. Now Delta variant, who knows, where it's going to take us. So
Yep.
life by nature is very unpredictable. And so if you tether your happiness to things being exactly the way that you want them to be and you being in control all the time, you're actually setting yourself up more for misery. And so as you become successful, you got to be a little bit watchful that you don't fall into these three traps, right? And there are
Sure.
other traps too that I won't talk about here in the interest of time, but
Uh-huh.
be careful that you don't start chasing superiority. Be
Right.
careful that you don't prioritize relationships. Be careful that you don't become overly control seeking, because all of those can undermine your happiness.
I love that, and especially, and I can relate to all of that. The first thing that you said about superiority, I always believe that there's going to be somebody better than you out there in some way or form. And if that's your benchmark, it's always going to be shifting, and therefore you will never be at peace with who you are. The second thing that you said about as you achieve more financial abundance, you get a bigger house, or you perhaps travel business or first class instead of economy. And naturally, by virtue of that, what is happening is the number of people that you're coming in contact with is shrinking. If you have your own pool versus using the pool in the apartment complex, I mean, the number of people that you're going to bump into is going to drop by a huge margin. And as you rightly said, the sense of community and belonging and interacting with other people, they can be a huge source of joy and happiness for us. And if we are isolating, success should not lead to isolation, and unfortunately, it does for many people. The saying goes, "Lonely at the top." So we got, as you rightly said, we must be aware of these traps and work intuitively to make sure that we're not falling into them. Professor Rajan, one of your TEDx talks, I think the one for teenagers that you gave at the University of Austin, Texas, you quote a study which says that our happiness peaks at the age of 10 and 11. And I'm reminded of, in popular literature, whether it's Urdu shairi or Hindi poetry, and I'm sure whether it's Shakespeare's Seven Lives of Men, etc., etc. In popular literature, this sentiment is reflected that pretty much, that किसी उर्दू शायर ने लिखा था, a couple of lines in Urdu here, कि एक सवेरा हुआ करता था जब हंस के उठा करते थे हम, और आज कई बार बिना मुस्कुराए ही शाम हो जाती है, क्यों हंसती खेलती ज़िंदगी आम हो जाती है, क्यों वक्त के साथ चेहरे की रंगत चली जाती है, कि सुकून की बात मत कर ओ गालिब, गालिब डोंट टॉक अबाउट पीस, सुकून की बात मत करो गालिब, वो बचपन वाला इतवार अब नहीं आता. That my childhood Sunday is never going to return, because all of us, especially the ones who grew up in the Indian subcontinent, have very fond memories of those Sundays in our childhood. So talk to us about, what could be the possible reason behind this, and are we is this destiny? Is this bound to happen to everyone? After 10 or 11, our happiness is going to go downhill and we're going to get miserable? Or is there something we can do to boost and elevate our happiness levels on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it's thank you for sharing that Urdu shairi, by the way. I mean, that was awesome. It gave me a little bit of goosebumps even as you were reciting it. I love Urdu and love some of this poetry. Just amazing how deep and philosophical some of these people were and are. So thank you for sharing that. So why is it that we are happiest when we are kind of children, and why does the happiness levels go down? I think that it goes down at in different ages for different reasons. I think that the teenage years are among our unhappiest around the world across time. And one of the big reasons for that is the hormonal changes that happen, right? We talked some time back about social comparisons, chasing superiority, it lowers happiness. And I think that as a teenager, a lot of that comparison comes into the picture, particularly when it comes to kind of, boy-girl problems, right? I mean, the hormones kick in and you start to become interested, usually in the opposite sex, right? Depending on your sexual orientation. And you start kind of at some level compete against your friends and other people in your gender for vying for the attention of the other, right?
Yeah, and seeking approval.
Yeah, that is, I think, inevitable, around the world. And I think that this is one of the reasons why teenage years are among the unhappiest throughout, history of mankind. And I don't think
teenagers, I hope you're listening, and parents, all concerned parents, I hope you're listening too. Yes, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's par for the course. And it's, a kind of, it's a milestone in our evolution as an individual, that the teenage years are going to be like that. And it's better to recognize it and not necessarily find it to be aversive or anything, but just treat it as a kind of, coming of age kind of a thing that happens. And also teenage years, what's that?
Or a phase that'll probably go away a phase
that you go through, correct. And the teenagers are also the time when your performance in the class starts to really matter a lot, because it can really affect what kind of a college you get into, and that can in turn affect the trajectory for the rest of your life. And so, for justifiable reasons, there's a lot of pressure on the teenagers,
Yeah.
especially in the 11th and 12th grades.
Uh-huh.
And so, lots of different reasons why that age is not a very happy age. After that, usually happiness goes up, but then comes a point around midlife. You look like you're in your early 30s or something like that,
I am
Simerjeet.
so. Oh, thank you. That's a huge compliment. I'm in my early 40s, Professor Raj.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I dye my hair, every once in a while, Papa.
Good for you. Good for
Right.
you. You're looking good.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So around, maybe in another 5-6 years, then you'll start to kind of, perhaps if you're like the average person, notice that there is a little bit of a dip in happiness levels that comes around this age, and some of it is driven by hormonal changes. Again, levels of testosterone come down, for example,
Right.
for males.
Sure.
Menopause might strike women, etc.
Uh-huh.
But also part of it is because we kind of like are running on this ambition and a kind of a myth, really, that if we were to achieve all this worldly success, we are going to be happy. And this is the time that we discover at some level that, hey, that was BS.
Right,
I
right.
was
It's
told
climbing
that
the wrong ladder.
right, and achieve all these things and richness and the fame and fortune, and you're going to be happy. And it turns out that it takes more than that, right? We've already talked a little bit about that. So that is the reason why there is a dip in happiness levels. And after that, though, it goes up. It goes up pretty steadily until you
Okay.
reach maybe 70s, 60s, 70s, where your partner might die, or you might have a disease. You generally get weaker physically. You lack the sense of autonomy that we talked about. You need help of other people. You can't do things
Right.
yourself.
Right.
And when your partner dies and friends start dying, sense of belonging comes down. Your sense of being able to kind of do things as well as you were able to do. Let's say you're a surgeon, you're not as steady anymore with your hands. If you're a sports person, clearly even well before the 60s, in most
Sure.
sports you can't play as well, and so on and so forth,
Uh-huh.
right?
Uh-huh.
So it comes down, but it can actually also really go up at that age.
Wow.
And it can go up if you have led a life in which you've saved enough for retirement, and you have a good attitude toward life,
Right.
and you feel grateful for all the things that you've had so far, and you start to not take yourself so seriously anymore, even if you did serious things in your, once you retire.
Well, that's something we should start doing before the 60s also, right? Not कि जिंदगी को बहुत seriously लिया मैंने, हर बात के अर्थ निकाले, हर खामोशी समझी मैंने. That I was trying to, the message here is that we should be practicing some of these things way before we hit that plateau as well. And yeah, I love that we go through these peaks and valleys, and they're all probably there for a reason, right? And I think for teenagers, we get loads of emails, suicidal tendencies, or being disillusioned, disengaged, bored with life. Part of that is hormonal, part of that is they haven't found their calling. And as you rightly observe about the midlife crisis also, I think that's a time when most people would want to buy a Harley or a motorbike or do something like that to again kick in that extra dose of I want to, another new sense of identity or belonging or a new meaning, right? Great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, as you rightly pointed out, there's hormonal influences, there's socioeconomic things, there's physical changes, biological changes happening, there's things getting affected with the peer group. I like what you said about, in the early 60s, and I have re-emphasized this to my audiences, that, you're perhaps at the peak of your intellectual power, your connections in the world, and so many other things around your early 50s. And don't, just make sure, ladies and gentlemen, just make sure you don't burn out. You're not reaching a state of burnout then, because if you're really able to invest all this rich experience and connections and money and other sort of things that you've accumulated, you can really make a big difference in the world, a positive impact, and you can enjoy and ride that wave way into your early 60s. एक और पोम मैंने जो बोली थी वो वायरल हुई, that's called जीने की असली उम्र 60 है. बुढ़ापे में ही असली ठाठ है. So which people, the seniors really loved it, when I said कि जीने की असली उम्र 60 है. The 60s actually, because you got all these responsibilities, loans to pay, kids who have to go to college and get married, etc., etc. So by the time you're in your early 60s, everything is settled down, and then you start afresh. So it's really important, I think. What I feel is, number one, your fitness. You should be in good physical condition to enjoy that liberty, that freedom that comes in your early 60s. So thank you. It's been a wonderful discussion so far. Before we let you go, Professor Raj, what are the 3 things that you would recommend from your vast experience studying this subject that we should stop doing in order to boost our happiness? I think you've already mentioned a few, but just for the sake of putting things together as we summarize this conversation, what are the 3 things that you feel people do very often that we should stop, that'll boost our happiness? And what are your top 3 recommendations in terms of things that we should start doing, incorporate small things that can boost our daily happiness?
Yeah, okay. So I'll try and be somewhat kind of tactical and practical here, rather than talk about things in abstract. Give people actual behaviors that they can stop doing, that I think they can start practicing immediately. So one of the things that I think would be important for people to stop doing is to spend too much time on social media. This is a general recommendation across people. There might be some people who are actually spending a lot of time on social media and doing it well. But most people, though, I think that the more time you spend on social media, there's just a lot of evidence for it. You saw my TED Talk for teenagers, and certainly for teenagers, but even for other age groups, the more time you spend on social media, the more depression-oriented thoughts you have, the more suicidal tendencies you have, and so on. And the reason for that has to do with social comparisons again. Something that we talked about earlier is that the more you are on social media, the greater the chance that you're going to compare your own life to the life of other people. And on social media, people generally tend to portray their life as being better than it actually is.
Absolutely. On average. Polished and filtered.
Absolutely. Right. So that is one recommendation. And, so in terms of actual amount of time, I would say that don't spend more than 2 hours a day, maximum. And if you think that 2 hours seems like a lot and you spend already less than that, just install an app or a program on your smartphone that tracks the amount of time that you spend, right? And you might be doing it separately on the computer as well. So you should do it on all the devices on which you spend time on social media.
Sure.
And the total amount of time should be less than 2 hours. And I think that most people are surprised to discover that they spend on average 3, 4, 5 hours. So that's number one, okay? The second thing that I would say is very, very important for a lot of people not to do is not to fritter time away that takes you away from getting a good night's sleep. And so I've noticed this among a lot of people, that they get tempted around, this time of the night for me, which is around 10 p.m., to maybe kind of watch just one show on Netflix, or maybe just kind of, browse this one thing on the internet and so on. And before you know it, 2 hours have passed and cut into your sleep time, and you get a little bit nervous of now whether you have enough time to sleep, and that then in turn makes you not fall asleep immediately and robs you of quality sleep. And so that's the second recommendation that I have, is that don't fritter time away. Protect the amount of time that you need in order to feel really fresh the next day. And for most people, that's on average 8 hours spent in bed, which means that about 7 hours of good sleep, because we toss and turn a little bit, wake up in the middle of the night to go to the restroom perhaps, and so on. Okay.
Right. So don't try and be the superhero, guys. Listen. Yeah. Don't try to be the superhero. A lot of this whole thing about, people boasting about they get by with 3 hours sleep or 4 hours sleep. And thank you for bringing that up. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. And, I think that people don't recognize this, that if they just got a good 6-7 hours of sleep, they'd be so much more productive, and not just that, so much more centered and happy. And I don't think that there is much in life that's worth sacrificing sleep for on a consistent routine basis. I mean, once in a while, to see a beautiful sunrise, or to catch a flight, etc., it's okay, to sacrifice some sleep. But if it becomes a routine habit that you're only getting 3-4 hours of sleep every night, that is really eating into your mental ability and in the long term your physical health.
It's a huge price. It's a huge price to pay. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the third thing that I would say don't do is to we already talked a little bit about it, but I think that it's good to emphasize it again, which is to sacrifice your relationships. In particular, I would say friendships. It turns out that when you get older, particularly, after the age of 50, when your children leave home, that's another time in which a lot of people in the US at least get divorced. And a big reason for that is that both the partners in a marriage have been so focused on getting the kids, to grow up in a healthy fashion and saving up for their college and so on and so forth. But when they leave, there's a sense of emptiness. They haven't really ventured out and made other friendships. And there's a lot of pressure on the marriage because there's just the two of them, and they're supposed to kind of,
Get along.
look after each other's kind of companionship needs.
Yeah.
And if they haven't really worked on it and have been focused externally on the kids or other things, then they have not really built a bank of common experiences and so on. And so don't forget the importance of relationships. Again, we are highly social as a species. And so throughout, and as you mentioned some time back, this is not something that you wait till you get to 60 and then you start to kind of you can't make friendships all of a sudden. Not that easy, So maintain your friendships. And especially in this day and age when it's easy to feel as if you're maintaining your friendships through WhatsApp and social media, but those are not real friendships, right? I mean, those are acquaintances. And what I mean by real friendships is where you go and see that person in person, face to face. So make it a point to have, at least one vacation with your friends every year, right? At least one, more is better, but, at least one.
Hopefully this will give a boost to the travel and tourism industry, the much needed boost. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that with this pandemic, it's been a little bit difficult to pull that off.
It's been very tough.
I think, hopefully things are getting back to normal. And so do not sacrifice the quality of your relationships. They're super important, especially for men. It turns out that men are the ones, women still kind of somehow keep in touch and everything, but men, they can get sucked into their jobs and things like that, and then they sacrifice their relationships. And loneliness, Simerjeet, is one of the biggest growing epidemics around the world. Loneliness. Loneliness is a killer, psychologically and physically, it's a killer. So that's the thing that I would say, don't fall into that trap.
It's even happening in India, Professor Raj, a country which supposedly had, we had a very strong culture of people just doing namaste or sat sri akal, passing by on the road to each other. People would talk to each other, even if they did not know each other. On the train, we would exchange food, etc., etc. We grew up in that sort of world. And now, I don't know, is it urbanization? Is it our attempt to be, the pseudo-westernization, or whatever it happens to be? Something has come in and people want to keep to themselves. And that's a dangerous trend, as you rightly observed, especially for men, because women still manage to express themselves one way or the other, but men, we bottle up a lot inside, and then we have to put on this face of, yes, everything is okay and fine, and then no wonder we have huge cardiac issues here as well, stress related cardiovascular issues as well. That's all. These are all correlated, I believe, one way or the other, right?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, there is in fact quite a bit of evidence showing that if you don't feel like you have good quality relationships and a sense of intimacy and friendships, you're going to suffer physically as well, and you're going to die earlier. Right? So the amazing thing is that you can actually have diseases physically, but if you have strong relationships, you're going to survive longer than somebody who doesn't have any issues but doesn't have friendship.
Okay,
so
great. Thank you. So it's social media. Cut down social media. Don't ignore your sleep and nurture your friendships. Those are your three top recommendations here. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the don'ts, and the don'ts also include the do's, I suppose. So I wasn't very strict about only talking about don'ts.
Talk to us about the gratitude journal, please. Because I want to. I've shared my perspective on that, but I'd love to hear yours. Is that what impact that practice has had on your personal level of happiness, and in what way or form people who are listening right now can practice it because some of these concepts come like too esoteric, too woo-woo, for many people. They say, I can't be doing that, and do I really need to do this in order to boost my happiness? So there's these all mental barriers. I'd love to hear your point of view on the gratitude journal.
Sure. One thing that I would say upfront, Simerjeet, is that happiness is like many, many other goals. It's not something that is going to land in your lap without you actually taking some concerted effort. right? You want to achieve an Olympic gold medal, or you want to be a great interviewer like you are, or you want to become a professor at a university like I am. You have to put in the hard work. I mean, it doesn't just land into your lap, right? And so I don't know why a lot of times people just think that happiness is something that, it's just an attitude. Sometimes people say that, I just kind of think that I'm happy and I'm happy. That might happen for a minute or two, but really sustained happiness comes from habits and practices.
Wow.
And one of the most important habits is to maintain a gratitude journal, or in general, be a person who's prone to expressing gratitude. That's super important if you're going to be a happy person. And the reason why it's important is because our subconscious brain tends to be negative. And the reason why it tends to be negative is because back in our evolutionary past, when survival was at stake and it wasn't to be, taken lightly, or it wasn't granted by any means, there was lots of dangers around the world. It was very important to have a negative outlook, because if you didn't notice somebody was untrustworthy, they might stab you in the back. If you didn't notice that slithering thing on the ground is not a rope but a snake, you could get killed. You had to entertain negative hypotheses about things. And those are the people who survived back in our evolutionary past. And we are the children of those people who survived. And so we have a hardwired tendency to be negative, except that the rules of the game have changed, and we don't any longer need to really fight for survival. Most of the people in the audience, or everyone really, in your audience, isn't fighting for survival on an everyday basis. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not fighting for literal kind of life and death survival. And so our aim now is, or our goal now is, the rules of the game have changed, is thriving and flourishing, not surviving. Okay. And when you want to thrive and flourish, it's much better to not have a negativity orientation. And so you need to replace the hardwired negativity orientation we have, which we've borrowed from or adapted from our ancestors. Adopted, I should say, from our ancestors. We need to kind of slowly replace it with not necessarily a positive orientation, but at least a neutral orientation. Okay. And this gratitude journal comes in very handy in helping us shift in that way. So what happens in a gratitude journal, the most common practice here is to maintain what's called a 3 good things journal, as it's called. Okay. So write about 3 good things that happened on an everyday basis before you go to sleep. And obviously, if you're doing it every day, it's not going to be huge good things, right? It's going to be small good things. Like, for example, this is not a small thing, but I got interviewed today on this wonderful show. That would actually be a big good thing that happened in my life. So write about small good things, every day. The fact that it was going to be bad weather, but it turned out to be good weather, for example, or the stranger that never smiles at me today smiled at me. Whatever, small good things every day, write it. And when you do that, you will notice that your subconscious brain is starting to accept that your life is a good life. And that'll just change your energy from the inside out. It'll just make you a happier person for no reason. But it'll take time. You have to be diligent. You can't just do it over 3 or 4 days and say, hey, I don't see any effects. Okay, do it over 6 months. And I can guarantee you that you'll see an effect. Okay. So this is why this is super important, because it's going to change you energetically from the inside out by changing the nature of your subconscious brain. And so that's why it's a practice that, I research and teach and talk happiness, think happiness 24/7. Okay. But this is one practice that I've been doing for the last 7 years. And I don't miss more than 10 days in a year. There may be some days in which I miss it because I just don't have the time. Maybe I'm in a flight and I have to run to catch the next flight, and etc. But I do it religiously, and that's because I've seen the effects on myself, and it's one of my pillars. One of my foundational practices.
I love that. And I hope everybody who's watching right now, you guys will take this seriously too. A little small effort is going to make a huge impact. I sometimes do it daily, Professor Raj, but I've recently started this monthly thing as well. So I'll just take the entire month of June, for example, and then every week I'll sit down. So there's A4 size pages that I'll then fold and put it in a glass jar. And it's been my New Year ritual to take out my jar of happiness towards the end of the year and say, hey, wow, it's actually been a fantastic year. Because as you Because we tend to forget. We tend to take these things for granted. Oh, wow, did our YouTube channel actually cross 1 million subscribers? And we had a party and we took photographs and everybody liked it on social media. And then 2 months down the line, it's all like, oh, where are the views? We're not getting the sort of views we should be getting. And now at one point of time, we were so desperate to hit that landmark. And now it's forgotten. We've forgotten all about it. And then this is this new one and the constant state of discontent. So as you rightly said, we got to train our brain to look for what's working well for us. I think our scriptures have taught this, our culture has taught, but we get out of touch. But now you coming in with scientific evidence, guys, a little bit effort there, and take out the time to spend with yourself and reflect on what's working well for you, because as Professor Raj rightly said, our brain is wired to look for what's missing or to be on the alert mode. We got it from our ancestors. It's been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate your time and you staying up late for us. We got 4 minutes left. Before we let you go, any final parting words of inspiration to, especially to our young viewers in the Indian subcontinent, Professor Raj?
Yeah, look, I mean, I've already shared a lot of the stuff that I think has been researched, and it's powerful. It's going to take that sustained effort, though, and so just stick with it, be diligent, and don't think that there is one silver bullet. I think that if you do a bunch of these things together, it's going to make a big difference. And I'll add one other practice that I think is a very good complement to maintaining the Three Good Things journal, which I don't have a catchy name for, but the practice is as follows. When you wake up in the morning, before you get out of bed, the very first thing you do is to think about all the things that are coming up in the day and choose at least one, ideally 3 things that you're really excited by. Every day in the morning, as soon as you wake up, just kind of mentally play this video of everything that's going to come up and choose 1 to 3 things that you're really excited by. Okay, that's going to
like I was for this interview this morning.
Exactly. Right. So, and there'll be days in which there's a lot of tension-filled things that are coming up, right? You're not looking forward to that meeting with the boss, or that confrontation with that neighbor or whatever. But surely there are some things that you're really looking forward to. If nothing else, you're at least going to look forward to that first cup of tea or first cup of coffee or something like that. Just smell it in your mind's nose, and just kind of savor it, right? That you have the liberty, you have the freedom, you have the resources to spend a couple of minutes just sipping the tea, and you don't need to let any other thought intrude on you at that moment. Just enjoy that moment, and in your mind simulate that moment already even before you get out of bed. And of course, there'll be days in which there's a good, nice, juicy thing coming up. Maybe a hike, or maybe you wanted to watch a movie and you're going out with friends or going to have a drink or what have you. So then savor those things. Those are relatively big things, but don't forget to do this. Every day when you wake up, as soon as you wake up, before you get out of bed, if you do this, it's going to give you a pep in the step, and you'll just be more optimistic. You'll wake up with a smile on your face. And I think that is a very, very good way to start your day.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all these nuggets of wisdom. I was just taking everything in from a learner's perspective and absorbing it, because it helps to, sometimes we theoretically know all this stuff, and then sometimes it's very important to get an external sort of reinforcement of, yes, I don't need to complicate things. A gratitude journal still works really well. I don't need to complicate it. It's the simple things that make a huge difference. It's been a wonderful conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, you will find additional resources to enroll in Professor Raj's online courses, or to visit his website, watch his YouTube videos, all of them in the description down below. And once again, sir, we thank you with a round of virtual applause for being so open, so humble, so approachable, so authentic. I think probably 20, 30 emails between yourself and our office, and you've been very kind to accommodate us despite your very tight schedule. This was Professor Raj Raghunathan, the Zale Centennial Professor of Business at the McCombs School of Business at UT Austin. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simerjeet. And to all of you watching, bye-bye, take care, and hopefully our paths will cross at some point. Thank you very much, Simerjeet, and Geetanjali and the rest of the team for pulling this off and for inviting me. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure having a conversation with you. Friends, that was Professor Raj Raghunathan from the Macomb School of Business, and a very humble, down-to-earth gentleman, and also somebody who I believe is practicing what he's preaching. And I'm sure you all took loads of notes as you were listening to him. I personally was absorbing and allowing that message to sink into my subconscious. And I think this conversation today has reinforced some of my very prominent beliefs, which is success does not necessarily lead to happiness. Number two was it's the small things in life that you must learn to appreciate in order to boost your happiness. Big things will not happen every day. You will not sign that $1 million contract every day. Those things are not going to happen every day, on an everyday basis. And I think that's what determines the quality of a life. Perhaps you'll agree with me. The quality of a life is not determined by these peaks, by these milestones, by these achievements. They come and go every once in a while. But by and large, it's how you spend your days, your average day. What is the quality of your average day is going to determine what is the quality of your life. Perhaps smelling your coffee in the morning. I got this recently. I think it's called Blue Tokai, this company. Wonderful coffee. And I get the coffee beans not crushed, but I get the whole beans and I crush them myself. So just smelling the coffee in the morning, putting on my favorite perfume, those sort of simple things, simple joys of life, or having a good, invigorating, exciting conversation about the vision of what we're trying to do with a colleague or a team member. These things, they really boost your happiness. And I will just like to focus on a couple of things that Professor Raj said from my own perspective, and share with you certain things, certain practices that you can use. Social media, he said, is social media can decrease, as per his research, can actively decrease your happiness level. I think the reason we all know, yet we don't practice this, people only put their best moments out on social media. So you're looking at the best 5% moments of somebody else's life, and then comparing the 95% of your life with the 5% of somebody else. Don't do it. It is always going to lead to frustration. Think about it. When was the last time you logged off social media and you were feeling really happy about yourself? Chances are slim, because you're taking in the stories of other people, especially in the morning. Don't start your day by absorbing what's happening in the lives of other people. Think about what you would like to manifest in your own life. Visualize your own day, as Professor Raj said, as I practice also sometimes, very often, is that how would I like my day to be? Worry about your own story, right? You don't have to absorb and take in what everybody else is doing. Not the best strategy, especially to start your day. Good night's sleep, good old-fashioned advice there. Get a good night's sleep, and yet this is very low on the priority list of so many youngsters. Especially, we take our energy levels for granted. Did you just notice I said I'm including myself in the youngsters club. We take our energy levels for granted. Say, it doesn't matter if I sleep just 3 hours tonight, it's okay. In the long run, it's not okay. It's not okay for your cognitive ability. It's not okay for your mood and how you feel. Even for your body. So get a good night's sleep. My dad used to always, when I lived in Chandigarh, I was going to the IHM Chandigarh, the hotel school there in Chandigarh, and he used to, whenever he used to visit me, he used to point out the fact that he was very upset about the fact that I'm not having a proper breakfast. And I used to just dress up and rush off to college, always late. And I think it makes sense now. It makes sense now. The simple things make a huge difference in the quality of your life. I never miss a breakfast now. What Dad said, what he wanted me to do back then makes perfect sense right now. So listen to folks around you. They have a wealth of wisdom. They've been through it. They know some of these things. And you don't have to resist it just because it's coming from them. Good night's sleep. Have a healthy breakfast. I believe in that. Friendships. Take out the time to... without an agenda, to spend time with people that enjoy your company as much as you do theirs, without an agenda. Really important. Just be there for each other. Have a drink together, or a coffee together, or a walk together, whatever it happens to be. You certainly get a better perspective on life. And lastly, I'll just close with this. Towards the end of the conversation, I think Professor Raj said something really important. By the way, if you missed the live broadcast of this particular segment, this video will be available to watch on YouTube later on, as well as if you're on LinkedIn, you can catch the replay. And we'll share the audio on all major audio platforms. And I think what he said towards the end really made an impact on me, that happiness is not something that happens automatically. It's not our default state of mind. In fact, the default state of our mind, as we've inherited from our ancestors, is focusing on what's not working well, because we had to be alert as for predators and other dangers. So we are not wired per se. If we leave our brain to default, it will not drift towards happiness. It's going to drift towards negativity. But with a little bit of an effort, we're using simple practices, daily practices over a period of time, you can rewire your brain to look at what's working well in your life. And you're watching this video, and I'm sure there's a lot of things that are working well in your life right now. So you take care. Tell us what you thought about this segment in the comment section below. If you have any further questions for Professor Raj, or you want to connect with him on social media, we will share the links with you. And in order to reach out to me and our team, write to us on info@simerjeetsingh.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's where we put out a lot of video material in different genres. We're always experimenting. So there's poetry in English and Hindi, there's Ask SJS series, there's a job success series. There are so many things that we are experimenting with right now. Thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye for now.